Okay, it's time to do the Kranzle tests. I've gone through all of the other machines with the exception of a couple of the cartridges, and I'm waiting for a couple of adapters. It's Saturday, and I don't have anything to talk about, so I'm going to do the Kranzle test for you. I've already done a couple of quick tests, but I haven't done the full gamut of tests and testing the output and the SPL. It's going to be a little hard to test the SPL on the 1322 because I'm in the building here and I'm not going to take it off. I have a K1622, which is again the same structure. And I have the K1122, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute here. But we're going to test the different systems. We're going to see how much current these draw. I'll show you why we need a dedicated 20 amp for them when we put the foam cannon on them. We'll do our Gpm test and our pressure test. One thing that I'm kicking myself on, when I had Rat Gate, when I had the squirrels up in the darn attic, I had all the wands, like all the guns and wands from all the various Kranzles I've had over the years, all the OE guns and wands, and I threw them all away. And now I need them for the test. So we're not going to have the OE test to compare the way it's set up with the original gun, the original wand. Very few people that are going to spend the money on this are not going to buy my recommended upgrades, so I guess that test would be moot anyway. We're also going to test the Comet, so we're going to do the Comet 1700 since I have it here. Show you a little bit about that. So we'll make a kind of an impromptu addition to the pressure washing project series and give you my baselines, which will be the Kranzles, and we'll talk a little bit about ergonomics and stuff like that. So this one is set up differently than the others, and then I've got this is the K1322, which is my design, or my asked for design is what I asked them to make for me. So 1322 running through a 2-foot jumper hose into a 100-foot Cobra Jet hose. Again, it doesn't matter the length. As long as you're 100 feet or under, you're not going to notice there's no pressure drop. There's no loss. This is a 3/8 inch, really pliable, really nice hose. It'll go into our Mosmatic swiveling gun. And this is this isn't the prototype I have here, one of the prototypes, but these aren't available yet, and God knows when. We'll see. I'm working on it. I have a little short hose here. I'm sorry, power cord here, and so I'm gonna plug in, and so that's how we'll get our power from our pressure washers. And then we'll run it on this one, and I'll run it on the 1122 and the 1622. So the difference between this and the 1122, so the difference between this one, the shelf mount, and the cart model, they're both rated at 2.1 gallons per minute, but this one is rated at 1300 psi. The 1122 is rated at 1400 psi. We're not going to get that output anyway out of either one of them, at least out of the gun. We're going to get somewhere in the 900s, 8 to 900 psi, but we should get close to 2.1 gallons per minute. We'll see. We'll see what we get out of them running the same tests that I've run on all the other pressure washers. So pressure on these isn't nearly as important. We want the flow. All right, so this darn hose reel is so smooth. So we have a drag setting on the side, but there's just no wobble in it. It's just really, really stout. The swivel could be better, so I think longer term I'd like to make this a really high-end stainless swivel, maybe even partner Mosmatic with Cox, but this setup is just really great. I'm pretty proud of this, being as I kind of dreamt this idea up here, and it really does function quite well. All right, so here's the setup I have to grab our current, how much output we're getting or how much we're drawing from our 20 amp circuit. This is a dedicated 20 amp I have set up here, mainly because these draw quite a bit more current than your typical, like the inexpensive pressure washers we've been testing. Okay, so we have the K1122 TST. This is by far the most popular version of the Kranzle that I sell. And then you have the K1622. This is the non-total stop version. So this is the original version of the pump that I was testing to see if this would be a viable choice to offer, and then that's when I met with the Kranzle family to have them develop the 1322, which we're going to test first. And then we have the Comet Static 1700, which I've removed the hose reel from it because the hose reel is garbage. So I removed that, put the handle back on it. It's kind of clunky, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but the hose goes in here, and so we'll have to kind of either lean it on its side or put it on a little stand or a box or something like that. So we'll have to adjust that. I mean, I guess this is really intended to be wall mounted. And then I put a fitting on here in order to adapt our Cobra Jet hose to this one. Let me turn this thing on. Now, remember, my mic is right next to it, so it sounds quite a bit louder than it actually is. I'm gonna have my dad pull the trigger. Okay, so the way I have it set up is water's on, turn the pump on. Notice it instantly turns off. So he's gonna pull the trigger. I'm gonna stand about 15 feet back here. Go ahead. So inside here, it's running 63.5 dB. Now, we'll get a little bit fairer test because I'm telling you, the 1122 sounds identical. So we'll get a little fairer test on the 1122 where we have the pump and everything. But just to give you a reference, in your house, when you're in your house, this will be inside. So generally, you would mount this on the wall, and your kids or your family inside the house, you're getting about 63 decibels. Most of the cheap pressure washers measured, they measured what, 67 to 72 dB. So you're 4 or 5. So it's already considerably quieter, very measurably quieter, just inside here. And notice the pump turns off immediately. Okay, so let's do our pressure test. First thing you'll notice on a Kranzle, sorry, I'm trying to get this in the right vein here. I gotta put it on backwards. So on a Kranzle, and then we also notice this on the Karchers, this is under pressure. So when the trigger is released, the pump is maintaining or holding pressure in line. So when the total stop comes, turns off the machine, the line is still pressurized. So that helps us with less ramp up time. So it is considerably more instant on and off. And so I'm measuring with a 4.0 nozzle, 1010, which is perfect. So this is my reference point. So the way that I like to do it, sorry, the wind's blowing, we're right at the edge of hurting my hand there. Now, on the cheaper pressure washers, we were doing it 1,000 PSI at a whole lot less GPM. Can you give me a current reading? Tell me what this is pulling. Okay, so we have 13.5 amps. So it would run with this nozzle, the K1322 would run on a 15 amp circuit, no problem. You could run it all day, unless you had that circuit with other stuff on it. So this is why I say you would need, to run it without the foam can, and just to run it this way, you need a dedicated 15 amp. Because if you had some lights and some things on that were drawing 2 or 3 amps, you'd kick the breaker. Either that or the pressure washer would go into protection mode. But this is the part that's really hard to explain, that those of you who have bought this from me know what's up, know what I'm talking about. When the trigger is pulled, it's a different output. That flow, the water that's coming out of this very gas pressure washer like. Again, a gas pressure washer is still going to have considerably more output if you have a good one, 2.5, 3.5 gallons per minute. But for an electric pressure washer that's 63 decibels, it's untouchable, by any of these other options. And I'll show you the Comet here in a minute. The Comet is more about fit and finish. It's just, we're not on the same level here from a quality perspective. Let me just do a quick little foam cannon test here for you, and then we'll do GPM. So this particular foam cannon, this is the PF22, so this is the higher end, the best foam cannon on the market. As far as some of the new ones like the Griots and stuff have a little better fit and finish, or the torque has some cooler features. It stands up better, but it just doesn't work as well. So this gives us a best foam, and I'm telling you, you can't do a 1.1 millimeter orifice with a Kranzle. There's too much flow. You're going to overamp the machine. It's just not reasonable to do that. So we We're getting an appropriate amount of foam on a 1.25 millimeter orifice, and let me get my current reading. Okay, so we're pulling 16.3 amps, right? So anywhere from 16 to 17.5 amps is what you're going to pull out of the, current wise. So you need a dedicated 20 amp for the 1322. Same thing on the 1122. So if you try to put a 1.1 millimeter orifice, I mean, this machine, this pump is going to pull, it's going to pull plus 20 plus. So it just won't be good on the capacitor over time. This electronics, the pump in general, you'll be overworking it. You can even hear the pump kind of grind in when you're doing any kind of foam cannon running. So, you're going to run the foam cannon for 3 or 4 minutes. And, I've been running mine for 6 or 7 years now with a foam cannon with no issue. You could, if we put a 1.5 millimeter orifice in this, we'll draw less current, but we'll get not as quality of foam. It's kind of like on the cheap ones. If you run this 1.25, you'll get some foam. You'll work the machine less hard, but you won't get the same output from it. So let's do our GPM test. Okay, got my 4.0 nozzle. We're running right at 1,000 psi, 1,010 psi. Let's get our clock set. So let's do our GPM test and see what we're getting out. 3, 2, 1, go. The other thing you'll notice, which is so great about doing the custom install solution, is it's 63 decibels, so it's already quieter, but it's also in the garage, generally away from where you're washing your car. We're going to measure a little less flow than what we would have if we put the stock gun and wand on here. Okay, so we're at 19.2 pounds on our bucket. And so 19.2, the bucket weighs 2.8 pounds. So 16.4 divided by 8.32 pounds. Shoot. Is that 8.32? Is that what I've been using? I think. 1.971 GPM. So that makes sense. So the machine is rated at 2.1, but we have a smaller orifice. Right, so we're getting roughly a 1/10 less flow than what it's rated, and we could have some loss through the hose and stuff like that. So 2 gallons per minute, quite a bit more water than we get from the cheaper machines. Sorry, I don't have my camera guy here today, so I'm doing this myself. All right, so let's first plug this in. So 1122 comes with a 35-foot power cord, same as the 1322. Again, keeping your model number straight. The 1122 is the cart model, and the other is the shelf mount or floor sitting model, no mount, option without wheels. And I'll show you the cart we have, the AutoFanatic cart that he's made for these models that we could use for either the 1322 or the 1622. Yeah, so we gotta go get a quick disconnect. I haven't used this thing in quite a while, so hopefully it works. So these have to be laid on its side. You'll notice the pump is the same pump as the 1322 we were just using. So let me plug this in and grab a quick disconnect. So assembly on these things are as simple as we send you this pre-torqued, and all you have to do is screw it on. Because the Kranzle machines come from Kranzle USA, at least for now. I'd like to get to the point where I'm shipping them from here, so I can ship it all as one package. So we just simply hand tighten that, and we're ready for our gun and our assembly. Same 4.0 nozzle on this one. And so these, I was saying earlier, these machines come with a 4.2 nozzle, at least that's what it says on the OE gun. So we'll get a little bit more output if we had the slightly larger nozzle, but we'd get a little less pressure. So just like all of these pressure washers, the rated pressure doesn't really mean much to any of us. Oh, I'm leaking from the hose. That's the soap dispenser spot. It should stop leaking here once we start using it. So this sucker, the only maintenance I've ever done to it is I changed the oil once. So we're reading, just like the other, we're reading here, the gauge is reading 1200 PSI when it's not on. All my fittings are a little leaky here. This thing's so old. So we are measuring 950 PSI. So the 100-foot, so these come with a 1/4-inch hose. So the 1/4-inch hose does offer a bit more restriction combined with, again, the pump is slightly different. But on our actual pump, we're measuring 1500. Mine hasn't been used in a long time, so I wouldn't be surprised if I probably need a new O-ring on here. Yeah, so we're measuring 1400 PSI at the output of the pump, and then measuring 950 on the gauge. But I'm telling you, this 925 is very different. It's right at the edge of hurting my hand. Okay, so let's do an SPL test. Let me get my dad to come out here. We're at 68 dB. So very similar to the other electrics. Okay, so sorry, this is just not a good video. I need my darn cameraman. But we measured 13.8 amp draw with a 4.0 nozzle, and then I just did a quick foam cannon test, and foam cannon drew 15 right on the dot. So you can see why you really need a 20 amp circuit. If you have a dedicated 15 amp, depending on your house, and depending on how much stuff you have on the circuit, or depending on how your air conditioning is running and stuff, you may or may not have issues with the Kranzle running. But with the 1.25 millimeter orifice, the stock orifice with the foam cannon, which is what we want, you're right at the edge of what's reasonable. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. So this one's outputting a little less pressure. We'll see what happens with flow, but I'm guessing it's gonna be somewhere right around the same amount. And this is on a used and abused machine, so if we're reading quality specs on this, a new one, it should look just as good. It looks like I got a drip on the darn inlet hose too. I'd have to tighten up. That's another thing to mention with a pressure washer. I send these things and they're expensive, and people have this expectation that they're going to be perfect. Well, they are pretty darn close, but you'll always be dealing with little leaks and things like that with water. It's part of the deal where you have to torque something down, replace O-rings. Your quick disconnects don't last forever. Sometimes quick disconnects fail really early, and that's just part of the game. With a pressure washer, even an expensive one, you're always dealing with little things you got to tweak. All right, so the 1122 is measuring a little bit less at 18.3 pounds. So we got 18.3 minus 2.8 divided by 8.3432 is 1.86 GPM. Yeah, that's pretty consistent. So it does about a tenth less than the 1322, and that could be, that could be why they rated this one at 1300 psi. So a little less pressure, we get a little more flow, even though the 1122 is rated at the same 2.1 GPM. So with our aftermarket setup, we're getting 1.86. So unlike all the cheap electrics, these hose rail on the 1122 is actually good. I mean, there really is no reason to even change the hose. This hose is good. I'm going to take it apart someday and see if how we could adapt. Internally, it's a funky sized fitting inside of the hose reel, so it's not as simple. Like if you wanted to put a Cobra Jet hose on it, it's not quite that easy. So my trusty old boy still kicking. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but one of the beauties of these machines, I don't know how to do it yet because I haven't had to, but I'm going to be going up to Dirt Killer at some point this year, up to Kranzle, USA, and we're going to rebuild. Maybe I'll send mine up there and we'll rebuild it. But one of the big pros to this particular machine is that they're completely rebuildable. So when it gets longer in the tooth, you've got several hundred hours on it. You can take the pump apart and put a new seal kit in, new plate in, and you basically got a new machine again. You could even buy a new cover, put a new cover on it, and then it can look new. So you can modularly, for relatively inexpensive amount or low amounts of money, you could set it up. I swear this thing sounds so much different. It sounds so much quieter. Maybe it's just the frequency. So it's measuring, 66, 68 to 68 decibels, but it sounds a lot quieter than the others that have some different higher pitched whine. But it is technically measuring the same amount of decibel output. Gosh, these little suckers. I mean, this thing weighs like 50 pounds. So this has the AutoFanatic card on it. This is just since I have it. Let's do the 1622, since I know some of you still have this machine. This is basically the 1322 without total stop. And it has a different plate inside, so it puts out less, more pressure, less flow. So this pump is rated at 1600 PSI and 1.7 gallons per minute. And we'll put our 50-foot Cobra Jet hose on it. So I'm interested to see what kind of flow we get out of this and what the pressure difference is. Now when I turn this one on, it's just gonna run. Shoot. Jeez, come on. What the heck is going on? That's what happens when you lose an O-ring. So if you ever have that happen, because you blew out your O-ring or the O-ring became warped. Because I tried to jam it in there, my O-ring got a little funky, so I just push it back in. If you didn't lose it, push it back in, make sure it's flat, put the gun back in. So that's what happens when you install it incorrectly, like I just did, trying to be hasty. You shouldn't lose an O-ring unless you do something stupid like that. And I didn't lose it, it just popped sideways. So now we're back up and running. I'm glad I did that. Now you get to see it. Yeah, so this is gonna need a different nozzle, the 1622. This is only running, see, it's pressurized at 1650, and I'm only getting 700 PSI. So this one will need to run maybe a 3.5 on it. This thing is insanely quiet. Like right now with nothing going, standing right above it, it's 59 decibels. Yeah, at 15 feet away, this pump running is 50 decibels. It's 50 decibels without the gun going. So you can't really do that with the total stop machines because the thing doesn't run without the gun going, unless we took the gun into another room or something. So here's a 3.5. There we go. Now it's at 1100. Oh, that really changes this machine. So it's a little light with a 4.0, little heavy with a 3.5. Oh wait, no, that's a 3.0. Let's try the 3.5. This should be perfect. There we go, 900 on the dot. That's the way to go. Let's check our current and see how much we're drawing. 10.5. Wow, 10.5 amps. And so the way that this 1622 is configured, you could very easily run a 3.0 nozzle on this, or maybe even a 2.5 to bring the pressure up. This is a pretty neat little machine. You know, the big problem is it doesn't turn off, but it does act quite a bit differently than the other. Let's get a decibel reading. 65, so it's the quietest of the bunch. So the way that this 1622 is configured with the wobble plate in it, the way it's designed, pretty interesting, a little different setup. It's a little bit quieter, draws quite a bit less current than our higher flowing machines. Let's see what kind of flow we get out of it. All right, so we're gonna do this with a 3.5 nozzle on it. We're running it at 900 PSI. Let's see what we get, flow. I might have to add this to the store for those who want it to operate like this. But I mean, it's sitting here running. 3, 2, 1, go. And you just listen to that thing, it's right next to me, it's 50 decibels. We don't notice it with the other Kranzles because they stop, they have total stop. Yeah, so 16 pounds, so that gives us 1.59 GPM, you know, the way that I have it set up with a 3.5 nozzle. We should probably, you know, you could run it with a smaller nozzle as well, because it was only drawing 11.1 amps with the foam cannon, 10.8 with a 3.5 nozzle. So the current draw on the 1622 is a lot less. Okay, let's benchmark against the let's bring the Comet into the equation here. The problems, couple of problems with this is we have to, if you're going to put it on the ground, you have to put it on something, because the inlet connection is underneath here and you can't fit an inlet hose. It just doesn't work. I removed the hose reel mainly because mine was broken, but I like it a lot better like this, or I'd have my own hose reel, which kind of defeats the purpose because, you know, this is 600 bucks roughly without a hose or gun or any of that other stuff. So if you want to use their supplied stuff, you know, it's just not very good in comparison. Yeah, fit and finish on this isn't as good, but you know, nice plastic cover. It's not as heavy as the Kranzle, not even close. We can put them on the scale, but it's about half the weight. It has M22 15mm fitting on the outlet, which is kind of funky, but that makes sense because all the AR stuff is Italian and also has 15mm fittings. But, this is rated at 1700. I've already measured this. I think I got 1.86 GPM, so identical to the Kranzle, the 1122. I'm gonna have to get an extension cord for it, and I know this doesn't draw as much current, so we can run this on an extension cord. All right, I got quite a bit of a leak here. Looks like the inlet fitting needs to be taped and torqued. We'll see if we can. So if we have some surging, I'll take it apart. But again, just like every pressure washer, you're always gonna have stuff like this. Doesn't mean it's good or bad, it's just water. We're dealing with water and plumbing, and at times you're gonna have to do some work to get it to work properly. So this does have total stop once it catches up. We'll see what the measured output is on the SPL meter. So it may measure the same, but it certainly sounds louder in person than the Kranzle, but not obnoxious. So we're 975 PSI with a 4.0 nozzle, which is good. So we have pretty instant on. There's a tiny little motor ramp up. So we'll measure this, and I'll have my dad give me my current draw readings. 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, I mean, in person, this is considerably louder. Okay, so it's drawing 13.9 amps. So again, you're gonna want a dedicated 15 amp. And then we'll put our foam cannon in. You're gonna wanna run this with 1 1/4, 13.7. It's really kind of watery. I wonder what's up with that. So we'll have to do some additional testing. I'm telling you, there's a big user experience difference between the Kranzle, how it sounds, how it feels. And I'm probably gonna sell the Comet as well. So I'll be a bit more unbiased, but I mean, there's still, like if you were here in person, you could feel and hear and use these and just have the full user experience. It's just much different. So here's a little closer view of the Comet. I think it's way nicer if you move or pull all the junk off of it, the hose reel and all of that. I got a new hose reel to try out, but it comes with JIC fittings and things that you're just not gonna want. This is, so I pull the hose reel off and then put this adapter on there. So it'd be great to do a jumper hose into a Cox hose reel and set it all up nicely. And then this pump ends up being what, 350 bucks. less than a Kranzle, you know, which adds up. So basically you can get your gun and everything, gun and wand is basically the difference between them. But you still want to buy a hose and everything for it, inlet hose and all of that to make it work properly. Yeah, there you go. So there's 18.6 pounds. So there you go, you got solid numbers. 1.89 GPM at, what did I say, 900 PSI? Or 975 PSI on the Comet. So there you have it. There's our specs. I'll be sure to publish all of this stuff once I get it all compiled. I still have several cartridges to do, and then I've got to order some more. Like I'd like to order the AR Blue Clean and, you know, continue to compile the data here. I just know that lots of people are impatiently waiting for these specs. So this one did 1.97. We did 1.89 on the Comet. We only did 1.58 on the 1622, which doesn't have total stop, and the 1122 did 1.885, 1.86. So all in the same ballpark. So, you know, the Comet is from a specification perspective, from an output perspective, is extremely viable. It does really well. You know, in a similar pressure output as these others. You know, the foaming is going to be similar on that as well. You know, fit and finish of the Kranzles, the rebuildability of the Kranzles, the fact that it comes without a bunch of junk that we really don't need, especially this one here. So really, if you think about it, you know, you're buying this pump for $950. It doesn't come with anything. It would be a lot more if it came with all the extra stuff. So it'd be really nice if someday if I could get the Comet without all the fluff, without the hose, because the hose uses JIC fittings, which are just, JIC fittings are a tapered fitting. And it's really hard to adapt that unless you use their gun, which their gun isn't very good. So if you want to adapt it, you can, but you need some really funky fittings that really aren't very readily available. So I'd have to try to source that stuff. So I think the way to do the Comet is to take it apart, which is really easy to do, and then go right into a hose reel just like this. So if you had the Comet and hose reel like this, and maybe you could do a cheaper hose reel, you know, something more basic, which again, I found that to be a mistake because they tend to rust. They're not as smooth. And you know, you end up, when you start penny pinching, you're still going to, so now you're going to be $1,000 in and $900 in with a subpar machine when you could have spent $1,200 and had it all dialed completely. And then that's when I say, why don't you just do this? But I think we can get a Comet all in with hose reel and everything around, you know, $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 versus this starts at $1,785, you know, just for this and the hose reel and the gun and wand. So, you know, it's still going to be, you know, $300 to $500 difference, because you need a shelf and things like this for the 1122 or the 1322. Still, you know, if $300, $400 isn't going to make or break your life, this is what you buy, no question. The output is validated, you know, we're right around 2 gallons per minute, you know, give or take. So the output is considerably better than the others. The ergonomics of it, the weight, the heft, the way that this is built. Like if you could come and put your hands on this thing, it's just very, very different than any other product you're going to experience. It's like the day you get your 911. You know, when you've been driving BMWs or you've been driving, you know, if you've been fortunate to drive BMWs, there's not as big of a change when you get to the 911, but you know. Or, you know, if you're driving, it'd be like if you jump from a Civic to a 911, just considerably different in quality and how it works and how it functions, the ergonomics of it, the way it sounds, the way it turns off and on, and then of course the ability to completely rebuild this thing. That, you know, 10 years from now you can take the pump, you could send it to them and have them rebuild it for a couple $100, or you could buy a rebuild kit for, you know, $100 and have essentially a brand new pump. So that's part of the, you know, the appeal of this, you know, Porsche level, you know, pressure washer to me, and the specs line up, you know, with what I would expect. So anyway, thanks for watching this one. I'll probably get a hold of the Sunjo Pro stuff. I want to get this stuff out of here. I still have all the cheap pressure washers here. I want to get these out of here before I take on more. So this series will be ongoing as as new pressure washers come out and things like that. But I wanted to at least benchmark it with the benchmark pressure washers first, before, or not first, but now, so that we have that information, and and I'm not pulling your leg on the output of these things. So, but I knew the specs would not be earth-shatteringly different. You could buy the $300 Greenworks or $250 Greenworks, did 1.86 gallons per minute. It had all kinds of flaws, and it took 5 seconds to ramp up. Probably won't last as long. It may not. But again, the fit and finish, just the overall package of what you're getting with these. If you picked it up, you'd know immediately you were getting your money's worth out of it. So, anyway, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more crazy. We'll finish up this project soon. What happens when the force pulls you back, your foot naturally comes off the gas. You have to keep your foot to the floor.